In this episode, we'll look at purpose because it is critical to true success. If you have yet to consume my episode on identity, I would suggest for you to do so before listening to this one. First, let's start off with the dictionary's definition of the word purpose. It is the reason for which something exists or is done, made, used, etc. The word purpose is often confused with the word mission, which I'll talk about in the next episode. For the time being, here's how they should be looked at. Purpose is oftentimes long-term or even for the life of the subject. As for the mission, it may be either short-term or long-term, and is often a specific expression of the purpose. You may look at mission as a subset of the purpose. Now for some quick, simple examples on purpose. An eraser's intended purpose is to erase. That's what it was made for, although I used it to play games with my classmates in my primary school years. A water bottle's purpose is to contain water for consumption. A car's purpose is to get from point A to point B on the roads. You get the drift? When it comes to people and organizations, it tends to get a little more complicated, though it doesn't have to be. Something useful to note is, until one is clear about their purpose, their priorities and productivity may matter little. This is something I'll talk about more exhaustively in another episode. Now, many years ago, a mentor of mine once said, rather than figure out what your life's purpose is, learn to live life purposefully. He proposed that a person's search for his true life's purpose may be endless and futile. For many, that may be a waste of time. A couple of years later, in 2010, another mentor on a late night supper talked about being purposeful in all that you do and at all times. And that ignited and sparked off something powerful which has greatly impacted me in the years to follow, and ultimately, I believe, for the rest of my life. And many times, purpose can appear broad and vague because of its nature, whereas the mission is a lot more specific and aligns itself with the purpose. Now let's look at one famous global company and a few people as examples, starting off with Walt Disney. The Walt Disney Company's overarching purpose is to create happiness for others. That's the unifying purpose of the entire organization. They achieve this by a specific mission for each of their businesses, such as their media networks, their parks and resorts, their studio entertainment, etc. Now let's look at Nelson Mandela. He was a South African activist who purposed himself to bring an end to apartheid or discrimination. You can search and read up on how he did that as his lifelong mission. For Ralph Waldo Emerson, it is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. In Helen Keller's case, she said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. For me, my purpose is simply to impact lives. This is not just about your vocation or career. It can and should encompass your entire life, from your daily living to your family and the various social circles you may be involved in. Now, in closing, don't despair if you aren't already clear what your purpose is. Many people, even in their 60s or 70s, don't know too. I've spoken with many of them. So rather than think along the lines of, what do I think I was born to do? An easier and more practical way to approach this is, how can I live more purposefully? Or ask yourself, what do I really want to do with my life? Having said this, you'll like to know clearly what your purpose is sooner rather than later. In Christian circles, we call it God's calling on your life. This really goes beyond your spiritual or religious inclinations. You've got to figure out in your heart of hearts what you truly believe you were born or designed to do. No one else can figure this out exactly for you. They can possibly point you in the right direction though. So here's what I'm going to do now. I'll share a couple of words where you can examine which you resonate more with as something to do with your purpose. In other words, you're more excited about. Ready? Here goes. Babies, young children, older children, teenagers, youths and adults, the elderly, animals, nature or plants, robots or machines, buildings. Of these, which interests you more? Take note, this list is not exhaustive. It's simply to point you in the right direction, and you can drill down to get clearer. I trust this inspires you to become more purposeful, or to even begin the journey of figuring out what your purpose is. If you need assistance with this, feel free to get in touch at kelvinchan.org. Thank you for listening, and have an insightful time. Hey, thank you for listening. Do take a moment now and like this episode, leave a comment, and also subscribe to not miss out on new episodes. Once done, check out your next episode. Want to connect? Do so at kelvinchan.org and also on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Stay well and talk soon.